Hello, friends, and welcome. This is episode 1 of season 2 of Journey into Fandom. We're back. This is a podcast where I have guests on to discuss what fandoms and communities they're a part of, what their experience has been, what the memes are, and how toxic or wholesome it is. I'm your host, Karis Lunn, and today on the show, we had AJ on to talk about wrestling. AJ talked about his experience getting into the wrestling community. It's a multi-generational passion that's been passed down in his family from his great grandfather. He also talked a lot about negative fans in the community and gatekeeping, and it was a really interesting discussion. So now, without any further ado, please join me on this journey into fandom. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Journey into Fandom. This is actually episode 1 of season 2, which is exciting. We've made it through. We finished season 1, and we're back. And today on the show, we have my friend AJ. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So today we're going to be talking about wrestling. The wrestling fandom, which I know 0% about, so it's
It's
fine.
it's very involved.
I'm ready. Let's go. Let's get into it. Okay. So I think you know the format of this. Like, I like to give my guests 2 minutes at the start to like explain the topic, and I feel like most people know what wrestling is, but for somebody like me who's never actually watched it, like, what happens whenever you're
The
ready?
very condensed version of it is
Mm-hmm.
soap operas for men. That's that's the best way I could think to put it. It's a bunch of athletes. It's a lot of storytelling through matches, and like you'll have things called promos where like a wrestler will come out and talk, or two wrestlers, or however many.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very big, like, okay, generally it's one guy's the bad guy or one group's the bad guy. There's and what's known in the wrestling community as a heel and a face being the good guy, heel being the bad guy. And it's like some type of story. They have an issue over, I don't know, something that happened 20 years ago. One guy said something to another guy, and
Mm-hmm.
this guy took offense to it. So it's pretty much soap operas for men. That's really what it is.
Excellent. Amazing. Well, you do have another minute if you want to expand, but if you don't, that's cool. We can move on.
Um, The only other thing, I mean, it was funny. I was talking to my wife about it,
Mm-hmm.
and I was looking up different things about wrestling, like how people would describe it, just because I never really knew how to.
Mm-hmm.
And I seen one, and it made me laugh. It's a bunch of dudes without pants fighting over a belt, and I thought that was the funniest thing on the planet.
That is true. I guess that sums it up pretty much. Pretty good. Um, all right. So that's it. That that's the whole thing. We can go home now. No, that's awesome. So thank you for the wiki condensed article. It's funny because
Absolutely.
like I see all these, so I work in a store that sells like DVDs and stuff. So like people will trade in their like wrestling DVDs, and I'll like look at them every so often and be like, maybe I should like watch this someday. Like I don't really know like what happens. Like they've all got these like weird names, like I don't know, like Judgment or like something like that. And it's like, dang, it's just
So
so dramatic it seems to me.
it really depends on what you start watching and what you look for in wrestling, because, and again, this is all just my personal opinion, because I know somebody in the wrestling community is going to hear this and I'm going to be a pariah, but it is what it is. So the thing about wrestling, and like when my wife first started watching it with me when we were dating 4 or 5 years ago, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I'll sit and I'll watch it with you." I'm like, the cool thing about wrestling is there's something in it for everybody, and it's not like you're watching like a Saturday morning sitcom. Like, you you can start anywhere, and
Hmm.
any episode of any wrestling show, promotion, whatever it is, and it's like you know what's going on because you can literally just follow it from where you started to the end of it. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah,
So
absolutely. So tell me how you got involved. Like, when did you start getting invested in wrestling? When did you discover it?
that's kind of a generational thing for me. So
Hmm.
like my great grandfather watched wrestling, my grandfather watched wrestling, my dad did, me and my brothers did. Like I can remember being a kid and on the Nintendo 64 playing WCW with my brothers. Like, and at that point, I was a little kid. It wasn't like, oh, I got to do this. I got to have this game. It was more so me doing something with my brothers.
Right.
And then I want to say I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and my dad took me and my brothers to a live show, and I thought it was the coolest thing on the planet. I met a wrestler by the name of Kane, who's actually a governor in, I want to say Tennessee right
Oh my
now, Glenn Fisher.
gosh. That's crazy.
And yeah, yeah, it was awesome. And I got to admit, like at that perspective, you know, he was always billed as like a monster, blah, blah, blah. And dude was huge. I was like 4'3", looking up at the 6'10", 300-pound wall of muscle.
Wow.
And I had nightmares. Like
Oh my
I fell
gosh.
asleep. I can I can remember being in the show and falling asleep. And like when Kane makes his entrance, there's a big explosion and when it happened, I jumped, I lost it. My dad's like, dude, it's just a show, relax. And it was the coolest thing on the planet. So that's when it really became something for me. And then like we grew up in me and my brothers, we grew up in a big family. Like we had aunts and uncles who were our age. And I can remember being at my grandmom's house with them and we literally took like giant pieces of cardboard and we cut out and made our own titles.
That's
So
so fun.
I mean, it's what we had to do. And I remember all of us wrestling in the bottom floor and my grandparents and my mom and my dad, stop doing that. You're gonna get hurt, blah blah blah. And like everybody in wrestling knows like you'll always see the big thing, don't try this at home. And no kid who's a wrestling fan absolutely like follows that direction. They see stuff, they're gonna do it. It's just how it happens.
Right. Right.
And then it went from there. Like I watched like I used to watch it religiously as a middle schooler and a high schooler, but then I got into like wrestling, like high school wrestling, and got busy with life and things of that nature, and I became a dad, so I couldn't watch it as much as I did. But then I want to say 3 years ago, they came out with something called the WWE Network, which is imagine Netflix but solely for wrestling,
Wow.
and me and my kid would watch it like the episodes as they got uploaded and all that, and we'd watch all the pay-per-views. And that's like it's a thing for us now. Every month we when there's a new pay-per-view, we go to the store, we buy snacks and stuff like that, and it's just a good old time for us.
That's so fun. That's really cool. Yeah, I don't know if I've like spoken to anybody who's been like, "Oh yeah, my grandfather and my great grandfather like, oh, watch wrestling like that." That's really fun. I mean, I remember talking to Vaughn and her talking about her dad and things like that. But it's really cool that that's something that's like a hobby that's passed down through your family.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So is your wife into it now as well?
So my wife is, but she isn't. She's not like as into it as like me and like my in-laws or me and my kid. Like she enjoys certain things. She's like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. Oh, that was funny." And so my wife likes to talk a lot of trash and mess with me, and she knows like one of my current favorite wrestlers is Drew McIntyre.
Okay.
And every time she sees him, she'll, "Oh, he's cute. Look at him. This and that," and just to get a rise out of me. So
Oh, that's funny.
she's more of a comedic value fan, if that makes sense.
Right, right. I feel like if I was to watch wrestling, that would be what I would be looking for is like the that comedy stuff because I feel like that's like a big thing in
Absolutely,
wrestling,
absolutely.
which yeah, it's funny to me because like so many of the like DVDs like look so dark and gritty and stuff, and I'm like, I hear this is supposed to be funny. I don't know what's up with that, but eh.
If you want to see comedic value in wrestling, go on YouTube and Google or and look up the Street Profits or D Generation X funny moments. and it'll be the greatest thing you ever see in your life.
Excellent. I'll do that after this for sure. Amazing. So tell me about your fandom journey. So when did you discover the wrestling fandom? Is that something that you're involved in?
So the wrestling fandom became a thing for me, honestly, when Facebook became a very big thing for me because, like, you know how you'll like this page or like that page, and it'll be like pages you may like.
Yeah.
So when I was active on like Facebook, like that kind of social media, if you went through my list, it was WWE Drew McIntyre, WWE Dark Side of the Ring, this indie wrestling promotion. You know what I mean? And I would just there's a bunch of like chat rooms like on Facebook and Twitter. There's wrestling TikTok, which they are some of the greatest creators, like wrestling fandom people I have met. Like the way they analyze things and the fact that they're always willing to talk about it and like hear perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I like right now I'm in quite a few different chat room like well not chat rooms but like pages on Twitter for wrestling
Mm-hmm.
for like AEW, WWE, a couple of indie promotions, and then all through wrestling TikTok with a bunch of creators.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. So it sounds like there's a lot of stuff going on in the community. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like I've never really I know a few people that that are super into wrestling, but I've never really understood what about it people really like.
It's kind of like what I said earlier. Like there's something in it for everybody. Like case in point, my kid, he's 10 years old.
Mhm.
All he sees is a bunch of people punching each other in the face, throwing each other through tables, and jumping off tall stuff onto each other.
Mhm.
It's wanton destruction and a whole bunch of nonsense. It's what kids are here for.
Right.
Whereas like me and like let's say my in-law, like we watch it more so for like the storyline aspect. Like, okay, is it believable that this is how this would turn out? Is it when somebody cuts a promo, which like I said is basically a giant speech, we watch it for like, okay, am I invested when he's talking? Is it hi, I'm this person, or is there emotion behind it? Like, do
Right.
you can you make me believe it? And like the technical aspect, can you like wrestling's fake, we all know that,
Yeah.
but there's certain aspects of it that like the physical aspect of it that's not, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So like can you sell a move? Like if somebody who bench presses 400 pounds punches somebody who's 200 pounds in the face, is he going to feel it? Is he going to act like it really hurt him? You know what I mean? Or is it just does it just look like a bunch of nonsense? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No, that's interesting. That's fun. It's a multifaceted thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm excited to check out some wrestling when we're done. That's what I always like to do is do a little bit of homework afterwards. So we'll get to that. Um, all right. So was there anything else you wanted to say in terms of your personal experience with wrestling, or do you want to move on to the discourse side of stuff and get into?
uh Honestly, we could move on because personally, like I personally never haven't had a bad experience with it, but that's just because of the type of person I am. The thing about the wrestling community, there's different types of fans.
Right.
To give you the short version, like I'm gonna say it, it's gonna sound weird, but let me explain it when I mean it.
All right.
The
I'm ready.
the wrestling community is fairly negative, but you have to find the good kind of negative. Like wrestling as a whole, it's competitive. It's a sport thing. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
you don't want to go talk to wrestling fans who agree with every aspect of what you say. There's no fun. That takes the competition out of it.
Right.
You know what I mean? The same way these people are in the ring, fighting each other. You want to have a healthy debate with people. But then when you move into the type of negative with people who are, well, I've been watching like the one type of wrestling fan I refuse to talk to anymore is older wrestling fans who are not on social media. Like my brother-in-law, he's an older wrestling fan, but he's on social media. He's like 15 years older than me, I believe,
Mhm.
and we can have a healthy debate. But then I've met, like my buddy's grandpa who was a wrestling fan back in the 70s and 80s. And in his mind, that's what wrestling is. Everything else after that was absolute garbage. Shut up, you're stupid, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's supposed to be fun. It's
Right.
not supposed to be that. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah.
And then you have to watch out for the I call them religious wrestling fan, like the religious nut wrestling fans on the internet.
Right.
And I get you like WWE. It's that's good. Like I said, me and my kid, we re-record every episode of wrestling and we watch it whenever we can. But there are wrestling fans on the internet. Like if you went on there and said something like you don't like John Cena, they're well, shut up, kill yourself, things of that nature. And I'm like, that's too far. That looks bad on the community because not all of us believe that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
100%. And I feel like that's so sad, but it's always like a vocal minority that like
Yes,
ruins it for
absolutely.
everybody. And it's like, come on. Like we're better than this. We can do better.
But here's the thing about it, though. What the sad part about it is, like, even online, you would think that's like the 15 to 20-year-olds or like the mid to late 20s or my age group who's like that. No, it's the older, a lot of the older wrestling community that I've noticed that's more so, well, you don't know what you're talking about, and like, Lord forbid. So there's a saying in the wrestling community: "What's your wrestling Mount Rushmore? Your 4 or 5 greatest wrestlers of all time."
Hmm.
Wrestling as a whole, again, as a competition, it's all based on who popularity, who likes who, that type of thing. So in theory, if you were, let's say, a bigger wrestling fan as I am, your opinion on who you think the 4 greatest wrestlers of all time is are different than mine.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Which is perfectly fine. But if you go to older wrestling fans and you say, okay, like me personally, the best 5 wrestlers of all time for me is John Cena, Roman Reigns, The Undertaker, AJ Styles, and it's a tie for me between Jay Lethal and The Rock, which
Hmm.
that's my personal opinion. But if I said that to an older fan, they would lose their mind because how do you not put Hulk Hogan on there? How do you not put Ric Flair? They were the greatest, blah blah blah. They were the greatest in your time, but they didn't do it for me.
Right.
And there are facts in the sense of like, okay, Ric Flair won 16 world heavyweight titles in WWE. That's amazing, cool. But that doesn't change the fact that one, I like John Cena, not so much for his wrestling ability, but for what he believes in as a human being, and the fact that John Cena has granted the most wishes in the Make a Wish Foundation since its inception.
That's so
You know what I
cool.
mean?
What a
And
jam.
things of that. Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
People say he's overrated. People talk trash about him, but I mean, John Cena has gone on record, not in these exact words, saying, "Listen, as an adult, you don't have to like me." But I've dealt with many adults who said, "You know what? I really don't like you. I think you're overrated. I think you suck at wrestling." But you inspired my 8-year-old who was dealing with bullying in school to keep going to school to try to make friends, and they're happy now. My 12-year-old who felt like they were alone in the world looked at me and said, "You know what, Dad? If John Cena doesn't give up, I'm not going to give up. So while I don't like you as a person, I respect what you did for my kid." And that's impressive to me as a man and as a father.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know he's like a huge meme and everything, but like he genuinely seems like a good person. And that's cool.
And that's where wrestling gets kind of tricky because some of the people you see who are on screen are like terrible human beings who do stupid stuff, like Randy Orton, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. The man has made a career of being what's called a heel again.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now we used to work with a friend of mine who, when WWE came to New Jersey where I live, and did a show in Wildwood. Randy Orton was in Wawa, which is like a convenience store, basically. I'm not sure if you're aware of what that is.
I think I've heard of it. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
you would think, like, because of his character, because he plays a terrible human being and all that, like he'd be that way in person. No, he basically like stood in front of the door, stopped everybody from leaving, and sat in that Wawa for like 3 hours and literally signed autograph for like 80 people in Wawa. But then you meet people who on screen are the greatest human beings, running around with the audience, hugging kids, high fiving, and all that, who have been seen out in public. And a fan's like, "Hey, can I get a picture?" And they're like, "No, get away from me. You annoy me."
Right. Yeah. And, and that's hard because, like, yeah, I mean, they're human being and they gotta, live their life. Um, and I think obviously if fans are being like super stalkery or whatever, or like, not respectful of that person's boundaries, like that's a problem. But I mean, yeah, it's a shame to just, dismiss them out of hand, but I don't know, it's hard. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. I think with WWE, it's kind of like any other famous actor. Like, I think it depends on how the fan approaches it. Now, me personally, I don't care how big or how popular you are. If a 10-year-old approaches you and you're a famous human being, you need to take a minute to say, and this is just my opinion, you need to take a minute to, hey, take a picture of that, this and that and the third. You know what I mean? Like if my kid, like right now, I think one of his favorite wrestlers is Bobby Lashley. So like if we happen to see Bobby Lashley walking down the road, I would hope that as a famous person with an impressionable child, Bobby Lashley would be like, oh yeah, hi, blah blah blah, whatever it is.
Hmm.
But I can understand me as a grown man. Oh my God, Bobby, I love you, and he's like, yeah, no, you're a little weird. I can
Right,
understand that.
right. No, absolutely. I get it. Yeah, for sure. Talking about celebrities, what do you think about like does the wrestling community have a take on people who've like crossed over onto the other side and like become famous in their own right? I don't know, is that a thing that people like have
I
opinions about?
So a lot of the people I've talked to, when you mention that topic to a lot of the people I've talked to, wrestling fans, they think one of two names. They think Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, or John Cena.
Right.
And now a lot of guys will say, The Rock, he's a great actor, he's this and that and the third, and blah blah blah, and he's a absolutely great human being. Which I like The Rock, but I like action films. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And then I think the thing with John Cena is like again, I'm a huge John Cena fan. Like my 17th birthday gift from my wife back when we were dating, because she knew I like wrestling merchandise. She brought me a John Cena shirt, and I wore this thing into the ground. Like it was red, it was nice, and all that. And I wore it so much. By the time I got rid of it, it was like a light pink.
Oh.
So it was awesome. But I think the thing with John Cena is people tend to say with John Cena that he's trying too hard to follow in the Rock's footsteps, in the sense of trying to make the kind of movies that the Rock makes, and present himself and as an actor the same way Dwayne Johnson is. Which, as much as I love John Cena, you're not the Rock. You can't sell things the way he does. Like, the man made his career off of his charisma. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Personally, I don't know too many people who have said too many other things about other wrestlers, like who have crossed over, and I don't know too many who have crossed over to make a living like that. Those are the only two that ring a bell to me right
Mm.
now.
I mean, the only other person I can think of is like Dave Batista is the one that I think of because like I'm a big Marvel person and yeah, I love Guardians
Yes,
and all that. So, and Drax and Mantis are my favorite Marvel characters in the MCU.
that's
Yeah,
awesome.
I love them.
Honestly, I'm not a fan of him in the ring anymore, but as an actor, I think he did great.
Yeah, yeah, no, he's really good. I actually think that he's a pretty good actor, honestly. Yeah. So, what about like are there any sort of like main like online creators in the fandom? Like I don't know, YouTubers or anybody like that that you follow?
So I follow a guy. I can't remember his last name because I follow so many of them. Like I'm the kind of guy, like I'll go on YouTube, and if I see like more than two videos of wrestling content, I'll follow you just because like I'll never know if they'll throw out some news that may be 100% accurate, and like maybe like some big event that I'm like, oh cool, well, if I would have missed that if I hadn't followed him. Same thing on TikTok, Twitter. But there's a guy named Simon from man, and why is it now just escaping me? Uh, he does it every week. What culture wrestling? His name is Simon. He's a bald guy. He's absolutely phenomenal. One of the best creators on YouTube I've seen. TikTok, there's quite a few guys. There's like Cody Kayfabe, Narcolepsy Boy 94, and like there's no real. And this is not a shot at any of the guys that I just named or any wrestling content creator on any platform in any way, shape, or form. There's no huge big name. Like there's several dedicated shows to like baseball or football. There's podcasts. There's no real big show for like a wrestling
Mm-hmm.
creator. It's just like whoever tends to put out more content. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas Simon reviews NXT, Raw, and AEW and SmackDown, and he does one video for them every week. So that's why he, in my opinion, is pretty popular. But again, he's got great charisma. He does this whole shtick called the Finger of Power, where he's like, if I like it, it gets an up. If I don't like it, it gets down. It's absolutely phenomenal.
That's awesome. Yeah. What do you think about these creators? Like, do you think that they represent the fandom as a whole well?
I think they do because, and it's to touch on what I said
Mm-hmm.
earlier. A lot of these guys that I named, while they're bigger creators and they're very knowledgeable in what they talk about and things of that nature, they're willing to hear people
That's
out,
great.
and that's what, in my opinion, the wrestling fandom is, and what the wrestling fandom should be. It's never supposed to be, well, I like John Cena. If you don't like him, you're stupid. You're not a wrestling fan. And then the whole brand warfare thing is absolutely obscene. And to the very condensed version of what I mean with
Mm-hmm.
that is, so there's a new wrestling promotion right now, All Elite Wrestling, AEW, which I like it. I mean, I watch an episode here and there because it has some former WWE wrestlers that I'm a big fan of. Um, Malachi Black, who was Aleister Black in WWE, who is Tommy Bludgeon on in real life, I believe. I may be pronouncing his last name wrong, um, but Cody Rhodes, things of that nature. And I see all through Twitter and all through YouTube now, and like people are like, "Oh, I love Raw." Personally, I haven't been a fan of Monday Night Raw for the last couple months, just because I feel like the episodes, the storylines, they're not they weren't doing it for me. They're just pretty boring.
Right.
People who are like, "Oh, if you don't watch AEW, you're not a real wrestling fan." Well, how do you know? Like, I grew up in a family where, like, growing up, we didn't have cable, but me and my brothers, we were always out in sports and doing things. So my mom just never paid for it,
Mm-hmm.
which is not a big deal. There are kids and teenagers and families out there who don't have access to watch AEW. So is it fair to say, for whatever reason, whether it's financial, time wise, whatever it is it fair to say that you're not a wrestling fan because you only have access to watch this? No, you know what I mean?
Right.
And
That's really interesting. And I don't think that's something that anybody's actually mentioned on the podcast so far is like, there's like the gatekeeping in the sense of, oh, well, you can't like this for whatever reason, but there can be literal like actual barriers that stop people from consuming the content. And then it's like, oh, but you're not a good enough fan. And it's like, well, actually, you don't know what's going on in that person's life, you know?
that's the thing for me. And you hit the nail on the head. And I can't stress this enough. The thing about wrestling is there's so many different parts of it that you get something out of it. You get something out of it
Hmm.
if you look for it. And I think that people tend to forget that while it is something, it's a big thing, that people's personal lives tend to stop certain aspects of it. And then, and you saying gatekeeping, it's funny because that brings in a whole other topic. And I tell people all the time, and it's one of the themes that I'm like, I've been listening to the show since you started it,
Thank
that
you.
I'm, oh, absolutely, that I think almost every guest you've had on has said. People are allowed to like what they like, but they're also allowed to not like certain things.
Right.
Like my brother-in-law, one of the greatest dudes on this planet. I love that guy. Got a ton of respect for him. Like, again, I watch AEW here and there. My kid, he's like, he doesn't watch it to watch it. It's more so just he's in my presence and he's hanging out with dad, which is cool.
Hmm.
My brother-in-law, he refuses to watch AEW. Like, it's just not for him. Like, he's just not a fan of it. Like, he doesn't like that it's former WWE. He feels like it's former WWE stars that couldn't make it with the promotion, which, you're welcome to your opinion. Now, there's nobody on this planet that can tell me that this guy is not a wrestling fan. Dude's been watching wrestling since before I was born.
Right.
You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? For every 4 facts I know about WWE, he knows 10.
Mm-hmm.
So things of that nature. And it's funny that you mentioned gatekeeping because that was something that I had wanted to talk about with you.
Yeah, I think when you said people are allowed to dislike things, and I think that's so true. And I think, I always see people getting really defensive about stuff and like, well, I don't like it because of this, that, and the other. It's like you don't need to have like a whole host of reasons. Like if you don't like it, you don't like it. Like that's all right. You know? I think that's fine.
In all actuality, you are absolutely right. In the wrestling community, and this is where the bad negative comes, and what I was talking about
Mhm.
earlier. In the wrestling community, if you're dealing with somebody who's bad negative, so to speak, you have to have 10,000 reasons why you don't like people. Like me, again, that's how I see things. If I don't like, I'm not a fan of Ric Flair. I've always thought Ric Flair was overrated. I'm going to get dragged for that when a wrestling fan hears this podcast. It is what it is. But I don't like him. I just don't like him. I'm not going to give you 10,000 reasons. You know what I mean? I'm not a wrestling fan for you. I'm a wrestling fan to be a wrestling fan.
Yes.
Whereas my again, I mentioned my brother-in-law again just because like I talk with him and my dad more about wrestling than anything. Um and he like so I like Roman Reigns. I've got a bunch of Roman Reigns merchandise, head of the table shirt, all that. He can't stand Roman Reigns, which it is what it is. So we'll talk about it though. And but the first time he mentioned it, he's like, "Oh, you like Roman Reigns?" I'm like, "Yeah, you don't." "Oh, I'm getting tired of him. It's the same shtick with him." "Oh, okay, cool." And that was it. Now he does get a little flustered. Like when I go to his house, I make it a point to wear a Roman Reigns T-shirt.
That's funny.
And every time I see him, he'll open the door or he'll be outside and he'll look at me. "Really, you wore that here?" "Absolutely." "And if I come back tomorrow, I'll wash and dry it and wear it again."
That's beautiful.
It's weird because there's two aspects in
Mhm.
gatekeeping that I have seen with wrestling that it irks my soul because like when you try to bring as a wrestling fan when I try to bring people in, like, "Hey, you should watch this. This is pretty cool. You like it." Like, I kind of have to be like, "Well, while you're watching this, and you're looking out for this, don't talk about this with certain people." So, me being a black man,
Mhm.
I deal with people who feel like, and I hate bringing race into anything.
Sure.
Um, but there are people who feel like so. I use Bobby Lashley because my son is a huge fan of him, which is no problem.
Mhm.
He was WWE champ. I can't remember. It was maybe 4 months ago now when he lost the title, but that my sense of time is terrible.
Right.
And I was talking with this guy on a wrestling Twitter, a wrestling TikTok video I had seen, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I love Bobby Lashley." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not a fan." So his next question to me being was, "Are you black?" And I'm like, "Not that that is of any importance, but yes, I am black." He's like, "Well, how do you not like him? He's a WWE champ and he's black." I'm sorry, I don't feel like, and it's become a problem where I've seen people tell other black wrestling fans like, "Oh, you should like him because he's black." No, that's race has nothing to do with it. Like
Mhm.
I like Kofi Kingston as a black guy. I thought he was a great WWE champ, but it turned into something to like it got so bad on that wrestling TikTok page that like I had to block the guy I was talking to and the actual creator too because they both felt the need to jump down my throat and oh you're call me every other name under the sun. You don't like him, you're self-hating and blah blah blah. No, that doesn't make any sense. It's wrestling
That's so
is
weird.
again it really is because I'm like wrestling is a competition. It's about it's about popularity. Certain characters get what's called a push, like the company will feel like this character has the potential, and I say character because every superstar plays a
Mhm.
character, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
They get a push because the company wants to push them to the top of the company because they feel like they'll make the most money. And, that's the point of wrestling. Like, my kid is at the wishy-washy stage where, like, if this wrestler is a good guy, he likes him, but then if he's a bad guy, he doesn't like him. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Which is okay. That's what it is. That's what it's supposed to
Hmm.
be. But then, I deal with, well, you're supposed to like him for this reason. No, I'm not. I'm not supposed to like anybody for any reason.
Right.
And it's weird that people do that. And then the worst type of gatekeeping I see anymore is women wrestling fans.
Hmm.
Like, and I see it, and like I've gone on and I've defended certain women, like creators, TikTok people, creators, whatever it is, because like a lady was, I can't remember her name, but she's since deleted her profile. But she went on like I think it was like 3 months, where every day she posted a video and she was wearing a different wrestling
Hmm.
shirt, which I thought was pretty cool. It was a fun little guessing
Yeah, that
game.
is
You know what I mean?
fun.
And I think one of them was Macho Man, and this dude blew his fuse. You're not a wrestling fan. Don't you don't deserve to wear that shirt. And I'm like, why? Oh, she can't even tell me when he debuted and blah blah blah. And I'm like, why does that matter? Why should she have to? Why should she have to defend herself like
Right.
that? Like, if she like, who cares what she likes? If she likes it just because she thinks, kind of like my wife, that Drew McIntyre is cute. Okay, well, that's what you took from WWE. That's what you like.
Hmm.
And it's just that gets really bad in the community, and that is, depending on what platform you're on, it's either the really older wrestling fans or the really younger fans.
Okay. Yeah. That's so unfortunate. I'm really sorry that happened to you. That sucks. Yeah, I don't get that. It's like
You see that in everywhere
that's
though,
true.
and it's just, I hate saying it like this, but it's kind of the normal anymore with every fandom. I tend to see, no matter where I'm at, because like my wife calls me a 200-pound child. Like, I like a bunch of like wrestling, Digimon, things of that nature. And no matter what fandom it is, it's worse in the wrestling community. I've only ever noticed that like a lot of women don't catch a lot of flack, um, as far as being a wrestling fan, if they say they like a woman wrestler. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? But then men get dragged for liking certain women wrestlers because they think like the wrestler's cute. You know what I mean? And again, wrestling is, while there's so many facets to it as a fan, like,
Hmm.
what you like about it, what you're looking for, it's not over. People tend to overcomplicate it. Like, if you like this, like, as a woman, if you like this dude because you think he's cute and that's why you're a fan, that's that's fine. That's what you like. That's your prerogative. Whereas me, like, if I like a woman wrestler because I think she's cute, that's fine. That's my
Yeah,
prerogative. Like,
sure.
I don't I don't have to be so invested where, I've seen guys who say, like, okay, Aleister Black, the very condensed version.
Hmm.
Um, so he wrestled in NXT for, I want to say, 2 or 3 years before he made what's called his main roster debut.
Right.
Like, NXT is their training, so to speak, like, to put it in perspective, and then like their main shows are Raw and SmackDown. I knew nothing about Aleister Black. I didn't watch him on NXT, and I'm going to be 100% honest with you. He made his debut, and I became a fan literally because I liked his entrance music.
Hmm.
And I liked his entrance music. I liked the dark aura, the tattoos, the martial arts background. Like, I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then, so for a couple months I only liked him because I liked his theme song. And then as I started looking into him, him and his wife, who is also a wrestler, on Raw right now under Queen Vega, who is a big video game nerd, which I think is the greatest thing on the planet.
That's cool. That's awesome.
um I as I started looking into him, like, I liked what he stood for, and like the way he handles life and things of that nature. But then I've talked to guys who have been fans of Aleister Black since he was in the independent wrestling scene, or the indie scene as it's known in the wrestling
Hmm.
community. And I'm like, well, if you can't tell me where he wrestled in the indie scene in Europe, you're not a real fan. What? Like, there are people who will say it, like I literally had a guy ask me because growing up I was a big fan of The Rock. I literally had a guy ask me what was The Rock's favorite breakfast when he was in high school and how tall was he in. I have no idea. Well, then you're not a real fan.
That's so stupid. These things are so arbitrary.
Yes, and that's the point, and that's I don't understand why. And this is the bad side, the bad
Mhm.
negative of the wrestling community that I don't get. Like, why do I need to know what size underwear The Rock wore in ninth grade? Like, that's none of my business.
Right.
All I knew is the dude's music hit. He walked down to the ring. He said a couple of funny jokes. He punched a guy in the face, and he walked out. That's it.
Mhm. Yep. And that's all you need to know. Absolutely.
So I mean, there's things now, and it's funny though because no matter what type of negative you deal with, or what type of wrestling fan you run into, there are certain things in the wrestling community that, like, there's wrestling creators who I couldn't stand, who couldn't stand me. We yelled, screamed, argued online, whatever it was. But then you bring up certain topics, and it's just like it's a universal thing that we all agree on. Like, uh, one of the saddest things, any wrestling fan you ever talk to, if you mention Owen Hart, Eddie Guerrero, or Chris Benoit, like, whether you agree with them or not, it's a universal that the consensus is the same among all wrestling fans. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I know I'm talking too
No,
much.
absolutely. I'm here to I'm here to listen to you. Yeah, no, it's interesting when there are those little moments that bring the whole community together, and that doesn't happen regularly. I feel like. I feel like often it's just like little things going on. And do you find that it's like the same arguments like a lot? Yeah.
Yes, it's all repetitive. It's all so right now. One of the biggest argument in the wrestling community is AEW going to put WWE out of business? And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Whether you solely like AEW, you solely like WWE, you like solely indies, or a combination of the three, AEW is not putting WWE out of business. WWE has been around since 1950, and I'm pretty sure it was before that. It was known. It was still around, but under a different name.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's not going nowhere. Does WWE have competition now? Yes, because WWE, their storylines are, as far as I'm concerned, boring as of late.
Mhm.
Because the guy who runs it, Vince McMahon, is looking, as far as I've seen over Twitter and things of that nature, he's looking to sell the company. So he has been cutting talent left and right, trying to make his profits look good so he can sell it to somebody else for more, which I think is the stupidest thing on the
Yeah,
planet. Like,
it's that kind of sucks.
especially when you look at, so like last Thursday, some people are calling it, I'm pretty sure it was either last Wednesday or last Thursday, but I think it was announced last Thursday. It's called Black Thursday, and WWE released some big names in wrestling. Like, one of the guys that stand out, one of my personal favorites, Keith Lee. He is, a big guy. He's athletic. Like, if you look him up on YouTube, the dude is, I want to say 6'4", 6'5", maybe, uh, like 360 some odd pounds, and my man moves around like he's half that weight. The way he jumps, the the flip, the
Mhm.
things that the things he does as a big guy, you should only be seeing in somebody who's 5'11", 120 pounds.
Mhm.
The dude loved the company. He could sell a promo, he could sell a move, and Vince released him because, for whatever reason, like Bray Wyatt, if you mention The Fiend to a current wrestling fan of WWE, they get automatically aggravated with WWE. The Fiend was one of the biggest money makers since The Undertaker.
Mm.
And it's recently well, I don't know how recently it is, but I just got an alert from Twitter like 2 weeks ago. It just came out that WWE released Bray Wyatt, who was the Fiend character, because of his weight issues, because Vince didn't feel like he had the shape of what he felt like a wrestler should be. And it's like,
Mm.
the dude sold you millions. Like
Yeah.
there were people who cared nothing about wrestling, saw this guy in the mask and the leather coat with the little lantern that was shaped like a former character's head, and they were like, I gotta see this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that
So
sucks.
yeah, yeah, it definitely does.
Mm.
And it's funny because you had said earlier about doing homework, and instead of looking up the I mean, you can look up DX funny moments. They are absolutely hilarious.
Okay.
Me and my kid watch them. But the look up anything about Eddie Guerrero or Chris Benoit.
Okay. I'll do that.
Now,
Absolutely.
I won't give you the exact details, but it shows you how invested and how in depth this gets. So Eddie Guerrero actually passed away in the ring in a live
Oh my
show,
gosh.
and he was one of
That's
the
awful.
greatest talents.
Yeah.
It really is, and like you say that name, like even now, and I'm 28, and I want to say that happened in 2005, and I'm 28, and as a wrestling fan, like you say that name to me, and it still bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And then Chris Benoit, I I, I don't want to get like I said, I won't get into too much detail because we're on your show, but he committed a horrible act, we'll say.
Right.
Absolutely horrible act to the point where, as great a performer as he was, as phenomenal as he was in the ring and the things he did in the wrestling business, WWE won't even mention his name.
Right.
Like, the man was a pillar of the wrestling business back in the mid 2000s, 1999, and at this point, like WWE, like they have their thing on Peacock now for all their shows and their pay per views and all that, and they went through, and a lot of the shows that he was in, like it'll say, Triple H versus, I think he wrestled him at WrestleMania, and it'll say Triple H versus number one contender, which we know it's Chris Benoit, but they just, because of the absolute horror of what that man did,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where, and that starts a whole controversy because people feel like, well, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame in WWE because of what he did. And me personally, and you'll understand this when you actually look it up
Mm-hmm.
and you see what he did, just because of what he did and the absolute the emotion behind it and the heartbreak and the travesty that he caused, no matter the controversy with WWE, but what he did, he does not deserve to be immortalized in a business where people have to look at that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think like there's always people getting canceled for stupid things, right? Like, oh yeah, a
Yes.
tweet that someone made like 10 years ago or whatever. And it's like, come on. Like that is to me those things always just reek of like I don't know, of just like people on Twitter getting into little mobs and like, oh, we gotta cancel this person. Like, it's just so stupid. But I mean, I think if someone actually does something awful and heinous, that does need to be addressed.
And it's funny that you mentioned that and I'll to use that connection, like you said, when people making mobs to go after people who don't deserve it and want to ignore people who do it, like using the Chris Benoit thing. A couple years ago, there was a wrestler by the name of Lana Rusev and one of my son's favorite characters, Bobby Lashley. They had an absolutely horrible storyline. Like it was a cheating angle in the marriage with Bobby Lashley and Lana. It was just stupid all around. Like, I was not a fan of it.
Right.
And it went to a point where one of the wrestlers, Lana, now mind you, Rusev and Lana are husband and wife still to this day, even through the
That's
storyline.
awesome.
Um, people are sending Lana messages, take your own life, you're horrible, threatening her, I'll find you, I'll do this and that and the third. And this is where I mentioned, your religious nut wrestling fans. Like, they can't separate the fact that it's a character versus the person. Like, it was her job to go on national television and kiss Bobby Lashley. Like, there was nothing she could do about it. You know, if she wasn't going to do it, they would have found a woman in WWE who was willing to do it.
Hmm.
But and so instead of realizing that, you want to go after her and push her to a point where she wants to step away from wrestling. Like that's a little far for me, and that's where the wrestling fandom gets such a bad rep, because there's fans in our community who can't seem to separate the character from the person.
Yeah, and I do
And
think that is a problem with many fandoms. Absolutely, but that is, yeah, it's unfortunate because like, this person isn't responsible for all those decisions that were made necessarily. They're just in that position and they're the face of whatever it is. And
yeah,
I just don't think anybody deserves to be harassed over things like that.
I had a friend who was bordering on being a religious, not wrestling fan, and I put it into perspective for him. I said, "Okay, so you're not okay with that because of what Lana and Bobby Lashley did.
Hmm.
That's fine." I said, "So are you going to go online and send, God forbid, but are you going to go online and send Jason Momoa a threatening message?" He was like, "No, why'd I do that?" I said, "Well, Jason Momoa, who played Aquaman, kissed, I want to say her name was Amber Heard, who
Yes.
played Mira,
Hmm.
and they're not married in real life." Well, no, it's not the same thing. No, it is the same thing. He's playing a character, and his character did that. She's playing a character. Her character did that. If you can separate this movie star from the character, why can't you separate this WWE star from the character?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's so true. That's an interesting distinction, actually, that you made. And I wonder if the community just like doesn't see it the same. Like, oh, that's just what they do. Because I don't know. It's weird.
And it's funny that you say that, because I've been asking myself that question since I was a teenager when it came to being a wrestling fan. Like, just some of the things I've seen, like I've seen people on Facebook, I love this such and such wrestler, they're fantastic, they're great, which is cool, fine, no problem. Then they do what's called a heel turn. Like, it'll be a good guy and they'll turn, bad. Oh, I can't take it, my heart is broken, they betrayed me, I don't know what to. And like, okay, I get it, does it suck? Your favorite character isn't what you thought it was going to be.
Hmm.
Yeah, but, like, can you understand that they're also getting paid to do this? Like, it's not that serious.
That's right. And that happens in all media as well, like you said. Like, that's all, and I think that's the problem is that a lot of people's expectations are so high. And they're like, I want this. And then it doesn't happen. And they're like, it sucks now.
Yes, you know what? And it's funny because you're absolutely right. And it gets so weird to me because, like, I see the stages, like I said, my kid being in the beginning stages of being a wrestling fan, and like he doesn't understand, like, the Undertaker. On screen he has these powers. He can disappear, he can summon lightning, all that. As an adult, I realize that, they rehearse certain things, and when the Undertaker does a certain arm move, a guy in a booth will hit a button and lightning will strike.
Hmm.
As a kid, he's not supposed to see that. So I understand, like, that's supposed to be believable for him, and it makes me laugh to watch him get excited about that. But then I start to think, like, I know wrestling fans in their 50s who don't seem to realize that wrestling's kind of, I hate saying it like this, but wrestling's kind of like, certain holiday characters will say. I don't know if children listen to this, and I don't want to ruin anything,
Yes.
but all adults understand what I'm saying when I say
Hmm.
this.
Yep. Absolutely. Man, do you know what? I got in trouble in primary school for going around and telling other kids that he's not real.
Oh,
I
hurtful.
know, I know. And like when a teacher like got me in massive trouble. It was so bad.
That's oh man. Like, it's funny. Like, I have to be the guy. My son's 10. he's got about a 3 year window before I have to be the guy. Like, I'm not worried about the holiday aspect. Like, I'm worried about telling him, like, you know wrestling's fake, right? Like,
Mm, that's gonna be heartbreaking.
yeah, I think he started to figure it out because uh, I want to say it was like a month ago. We were watching older matches, and we were watching um, John Cena and Randy Orton wrestle in Hell in a Cell, and which it's supposed to be like a really like dangerous match. It's really not, but it is what it is. And John had what's called a botch in the match, which means they made a mistake on live TV, basically.
All right.
And people don't my son thinks like when a wrestler gets busted open, like it's a real legit thing. Like, no, what happens is, and in their ring attire in some place they hide a little razor, so when that said wrestler gets knocked over, and they can't see you on the camera angle, the wrestler will take the razor and cut their forehead open so they bleed.
Mm-hmm.
So we're watching it. John Cena got knocked over, and then the razor fell out of his armband. The ref seen it, picked it up, but my son seen that. Dad, what? He's like, is that a razor? So I had to like really veer out of the conversation. I'm like, go do your nighttime chores. By the time he came back, he completely forgot.
Oh wow. Man, that sounds painful. I don't want to do that. I don't want to cut myself with a razor.
See, I agree with that, but if somebody came to you and said, "Listen, go on national television, go ahead and cut your forehead open with a razor, and when you're done, we will hand you a check for 22 grand," you tend to make exceptions.
Mm, oh yeah. Mm, I suppose. Yeah. I wouldn't do that for free.
Oh, absolutely not. But if you're gonna pay me, if you're gonna hand me a check for one night, what I make in a year, yeah, I think I could cut my forehead open with a razor.
Okay, here's a question.
Okay.
Like, I mean, to me that just sounds like self-harm. Like, I don't get it. Like
I can
is
see,
it
I can see why you say
is
that.
that a thing that people think? Or is that just me
It,
cuz I'm not part of the community? Like that just doesn't sound like a normal thing to do.
and I think that's what it is because you're not a wrestling fan, you're not a part of the community. Like, look on from the outside looking in, yes, I can see why you think like hearing that it would sound like self harm, but it's for the dramatic effect because I'll say it like this, and this is not an insult because again, I'm a huge wrestling fan, and I don't want to get dragged by the wrestling community.
Yeah.
But wrestlers are some of the best paid actors because most actors they get paid when they make a movie, and then some of the DVD sales. Wrestlers are on the road for 3/4 of the year doing this, and they get paid every time they're on the road. So there it's more so like if this is your way of life, if this is what you're doing to make a living for you, your family, whatever it is, you're going to do you're going to do what you have to do it to the best of your ability, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I guess.
And I think that's what makes people real like in the wrestling fandom look at it like, oh, okay, no, it's not like they're not doing it every single day, and especially considering I think it would border on self harm if like the same wrestler every time you see him every single week is getting busted open, and like in your head you're thinking, wow, he's cutting his head open 10 times a week. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, that's bordering closely on self harm, but like you'll see a wrestler get busted open in the beginning of September in 2010. That same wrestler won't get busted open again until 2018, if that makes sense.
Okay. It's not a frequent thing.
No, no,
Okay.
it's really
That makes me feel better. If I ever wanted to go and become a wrestler, that I don't have to worry about being cut open every 2 seconds,
not. No, no, absolutely
which
not.
I don't know if that would ever happen because first of all, I am a tiny woman. I am about 5 foot 1.5. Are there any short wrestlers that are like just over 5 foot? Is that a thing that exists?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It, I want to say Rey Mysterio. I'm not too familiar with like indie wrestlers, and I'm not too familiar with like Ring of Honor, WWE, Impact. Or no, I'm sorry, Ring of Honor, AEW, Impact Wrestling. I'm not too familiar with their rosters. Like I know certain guys from each one of them, but I know Rey Mysterio in WWE. I'm pretty sure is the shortest male wrestler, and I'm pretty sure he's like 5'10", five. Or no, he actually might be closer to 5'3". I might be thinking of another guy in a mask.
Oh wow. Well,
It's
he's still got a little bit on me, a couple inches maybe.
all about the camera angles. You'd be surprised how many people like you'll see him on television with the high def cameras and 45 cameras circling him every 2 seconds, and you're like, wow, that guy looks gigantic. And then you meet him in person, and you're like, huh, you're standing eye to eye with me, and I'm only 5'8". Who knew?
That's fun. Maybe there's hope for me. Maybe
Absolutely.
maybe this is my calling in life.
Here's the thing: if you ever want to become a WWE wrestler, you have to have a college degree.
Really?
Yes. And it's funny because I don't think people look like I when I tell you I'm a wrestling fan, I look into all aspects. Like I said, I watch like Dark Side of the Ring. I
Mhm.
listen to After the Bell, things of that nature. Do research and certain things. And just out of curiosity, I was looking around and like looking at professional wrestling schools. And I was talking to this one guy who actually went to a professional wrestling school, and he was like, "Yeah, I had a WWE tryout, but I got automatically denied." And I said, "What? Why?" And he was like, because I don't have, I think he said you have to have a bachelor's degree. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Why do you have to have a bachelor's degree to jump off a rope? That, doesn't, 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 5 there. He was like,
Right.
well, because the way WWE looks at it is certain things scripted. Yeah. But there's still a chance for accidents happening. There's still, again, Owen Hart, they performed this stunt where he was supposed to zip line to the ring, and they did it 10,000 times, nothing happened. The day of the performance, he zip lined, and he was about 50 or 60 feet in the air. I don't know if the release button got broke, whatever it was, but he fell off the zip line and fell to his death.
Oh no.
Yeah. So they look at it like at any given time things can happen. You can go you can be 2 years into your wrestling career and suffer a career ending injury. And they want you to have a backup plan. So that way
Right.
if 6 months in you can't wrestle anymore, they can say, look, you can't do this anymore, but because you have your bachelor's degree, you can go down the road and get this 6-figure job and you'll be okay.
Well, that makes a lot of sense actually.
Yeah, really do wish it was something that was in a rule in more sports, football, basketball, things of
Mhm.
that nature. But it's the one thing WWE's gotten right. I'm not sure about like AEW or Ring of Honor or things of that nature, but I got to give credit where credit is due.
That's fascinating. Is it just any degree? Just anything? Pretty much?
Anything.
There you
Um,
go. Well, I do have
again,
a degree. So there you go. I could become a wrestler.
listen, you become a wrestler. I will buy your merch. I will come to your shows. I got you.
Yes.
You know
Yeah,
what?
if I
That's my homework. When we get done, I'm going to start Karis WWE Twitter page.
Beautiful. Amazing. Um wow. Okay. Yeah, if my podcasting career falls through, I know what I'll be doing. Um well, thank you, AJ. Is there anything else you want to chat about at all?
No, just can I give a couple of shout outs to some really good, cool friends of mine who've
Of
actually
course.
supported me for this. My friend,
Yes.
Lee's wife, Jamie Lamy on Twitch, absolutely phenomenal human being.
Mhm.
Uh, Fallen Panda 86, C Valentine on Twitch, Diced GA, my wife, my sister Stormy, and like I've been talking nonstop about this with all of my friends. I'm like, dude, I'm doing a podcast. This is awesome. I told my wife, I'm like, I'm really nervous. She's like, dude, just go in there, talk about something you love, and you'll be okay.
Oh. Well, bless you. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a joy and a pleasure, and I've learned so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we'll have to do this again.
Absolutely. I can come back and talk about Digimon, Power Rangers, whatever you want. I'm a
Let's
nerd.
go. Let's go. Well, thank you so much, AJ. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So that was AJ. He's a really good friend of this show, and I really enjoyed talking to him about wrestling. I always love hearing people talk about things that I don't know anything about. He's a great human being, and this was an excellent conversation. My name is Karis. You can follow Journey Into Fandom on Twitter at j_into_fandom. I am at Carison Ford on Twitter. Please also join the official Discord for all my podcasts, Kingdom Minds, Retrospective, and Journey Into Fandom. You can support the show by visiting patreon.com/into the Carisverse. Thank you for listening. Bye.